Hello and welcome to the UK Sailmakers Lessons Learned podcast series, where we hear stories and tips from experienced sailors that will help you sail with confidence. I'm your host, Brendan Huffman, from the UK Sailmakers Los Angeles Loft. Today, I'm joined by Marie Rogers, a sailor and advocate from Los Angeles, California. Marie is a licensed captain, staff commodore of Los Angeles Yacht Club, a classroom teacher, a TransPac skipper, a U.S. Sailing Board member, National Women's Sailing Association Board member, Southern California Yachting Association Board member, and chair of its Inclusivity Committee, and she's a mom. Marie, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure. It's an honor.
So I want to start with the TransPac last year, because you skippered a boat in Andrews 56, Good Trouble, and you did something that was a first in TransPac history with your crew. What was it?
Well, it appears that this is the first program that was minority majority. So all but two people on the boat represented a minority that you don't normally see on boats.
And what was the breakdown? Because you also had, I think, more women than men on board, which is unusual for offshore racing.
Yeah, it was awesome. So we had, there were 9 of us all together, 5 women and 4 men.
So how did this come to be? You started the Offshore Racing Outreach Program. You procured a boat in the San Francisco Bay. What inspired you and your supporters to pursue this type of program in the TransPac?
Well, bottom line, the person writing the checks came to me and said, Marie, I just realized that when I watch the boats come in, they're basically all white males with a small sprinkling of females. This is not right. You know, something needs to change. And I'm like, yeah, I've been noticing this for like the past 40, 50 years. And so this is a white male who wanted to make a difference. And he wanted to speed up the progress by sponsoring a team. He wanted me to find the people, and he wanted my husband, Bill Rogers, who's well known for rehabbing boats, to help me find a boat, put it together, and build this team.
And where did you find the boat? It was up in the bay, hadn't been sailed in a long time. What were some of the hurdles to get the boat to LA and get it actually running?
Oh, well, first of all, was getting the boat. So this is in the middle of the pandemic, and there weren't a lot of boats for sale at the time that were TransPac capable or that we could afford with our budget. So we went to one of our friends, Alan Andrews, and said, Alan, you know, what do you suggest? Do you know anything that's out there maybe that's not on the market? And he goes, oh, yeah, I know a couple up in Northern California, and they haven't sailed the boat for a long time. They're getting on in years, but it's a great boat. It's the very first Andrews 56. So we flew up to the Bay Area, looked at the boat, and thought, yeah, this will do it. But we soon discovered that there were problems. For example, there's a huge sail inventory. I mean, this previous owner had like all the tricks and whistles on this boat. I mean, it had radar, it had a heating system, it had a fully refrigerated, you know, shower, pressure water, like the whole deal. Much more cruisy than a race boat in some ways. But it turns out none of it was really functioning. The boat had been sitting in a slip for, I believe, 6 years. He had it all ready for Pac Cup, but then they were not able to race. And so he just basically sat there.
You mentioned a very large sail inventory.
Yeah.
Did they store the sails on the boat, or did they have another facility?
So they had some sails in a suburban parked out in front of their house, but the vast majority of the sails were under their house and full of all sorts of critters and nesting in them, pooping and peeing on them. It was really quite a shame. So that when we were able to get Sylvain Barrielle from UK Sailmakers came out, I think we met him like in Alameda. He was able to pick up all the sails and go through them and determine what was okay and what was not okay. Unfortunately, he had to suffer a lot of critter excrement flying out of the sails. It was really an adventure.
Okay, so lesson learned number 1, don't store your sails underneath your house.
No, it was ridiculous because somebody's a rent literally had not been used. They were bought for pack up, and then so what we were able to salvage, we did, but some of them were just too gross. We got rid of them.
That's too bad. But you got the boat down to LA Harbor and you started putting your team together. What were you looking for with your crew? I know you got a lot of resumes. How did you put the team together as far as talent and chemistry?
No, this was so hard. First of all, how do you find sailors who have some experience who maybe have not done offshore but represent these underrepresented minority groups? It was super hard. I have a friend I've done offshore with who used to live in LA, now lives in Maryland. So he would fly in when he could. He was a great guy. We had a couple of young ladies who were do foredeck for the most part. I can, up and down the coast, from San Francisco to LA, mainly in the LA area. I had one lady who was from the Black cruising circuit, who'd done a lot of crewing and had done some deliveries and so on. I could not find a diesel mechanic, so that's one of the white guys in up on the boat, great guy. And I did not have a navigator. So we actually ended up having to partner with J-Roll. We could not leave San Francisco because we couldn't get insurance for the boat. That was like the biggest hurdle we had to go over. And once I called my friend Wayne to tell at J-Roll, I'm like, Wayne, like, how do you get your insurance? Like, how do you do this? And he said, well, why don't you just become one of my boats? And so we got a J-Roll navigator, and that was Paul. So yeah, it all worked out. So that was the first big hurdle, just getting the boat to Southern California, getting it insured. While that was happening, we were practicing a lot on our family boat, Marie, which is the Nelson Merrick 55, as much as we could. And I interviewed like everybody, looked into their backgrounds. And near the end, some of the spaces I basically had to go by referral. For example, you, Brendan, found me a wonderful person. It was Ariana, and she was able to bring Sandy on. And it went like that. We didn't have very much time. I mean, we literally had just under 2 years to put this whole thing together.
Well, also when the boat got to Los Angeles, you were only a few months before the start date. So there were a lot of things to do on the boat, not just going through the sail inventory and training the crew.
But we had such little time. And then just when we thought, okay, we're going to go out, we're going to practice, and then we're waiting for a system to be upgraded. And then we're depending on really wonderful people that were helping us put the boat together. But there were other boats that they were working on as well. So it was hard to get all the scheduling in. And then the last thing that we didn't do, the last system that we really needed to check was to pull the rudder. That set us back like 6 weeks because of all the other boats in the yard at the time. So we didn't do nearly as much training as we wanted to. We actually didn't race the boat before TransPac.
Once you started the race, how did the personalities mesh?
Well, I like to say this is my specialty. I'm a teacher as well, so I'm always dealing with interesting personalities. And it pretty much worked, but I knew that on top of it, of the 9 of us, only 3 of us had been offshore. Only 2 of us had done TransPac before. So those of you who are watching this know that you really don't know your crew until you've spent at least one overnight with them, which we did for our qualifier. As the fatigue set in and the excitement sort of wore off, then yes, the personality started coming out. I'm very happy how people basically showed up for what they needed to do. There was a lot of strength and bravery and good natured fun that we had. I mean, yes, there were times when people kind of, rubbed against each other, but that was my job to make sure everybody got along and we were safe.
Yeah, seeing photos of your trip and videos, I must say I had FOMO watching your halfway party, which looked like the most fun halfway party I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was awesome. So yeah, we brought costumes, we had Hawaiian music, and we had dancing, and yeah. But as soon as that was over, we stripped all that stuff off, put our fallies back on, and we're back to work again. It was awesome. Don't get me wrong, but it was quite the race.
And now your crew members get to put on their resume that they have offshore experience, that they've raced to Hawaii before, and now they'll get more opportunities, which I know is part of your goal.
Yeah, that's part of the whole initiative. I've had people kind of ask, like, well, why are you doing this? And why only like colored people? People say insane stuff. And it's like, look, the chances of these people being asked to do offshore is so unattainable. And now they have the opportunity to step on another boat because they have this on their resume.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Why is the opportunity sometimes unattainable for people of color in the sailing community?
Oh, I think a lot of it's just the history of our country. We have redlined people of color into, inner cities, away from the water. I mean, families like mine couldn't buy a house in Signal Hill or, Newport or Palos Verdes. We could afford it, but we just were banned from doing it. And so now there's a lot of distrust of sailing and yacht clubs and in the sport in general. People just know based on what happened to their parents and their grandparents and great grandparents that we are not included. We're not, part of that scene.
But you're addressing that. And so in the introduction, I referred to you as an advocate. You joined the board of US Sailing last year. You're a staff commodore of Los Angeles Yacht Club. Why don't you tell us things that you think are changing for the better, and then tell us what still needs to change?
Oh man, I could write a PhD on this one. One question. It takes people being brave and showing up. The first time I was on a boat, I was 24 years old. It was part of a sort of a dating situation. I fell in love with the boat, not with the man. It's like I love the sailing part of it. And then years later, I ran into the man who's now my husband through sailing. And he was just tickled that I like being on the boats. Like I didn't like hanging out in the clubhouse and all that. So I'm like really one of the unicorns, being female and being a person of color. Um, but I can walk into just like any club and I feel fine. Like when I first walked into my club, I was the very first Black member of my yacht club, which was established, at the turn of the century. So it was a long time. It became a
Wait, the turn of the 20th, the turn of the last century, not this century,
right,
over
right,
100 years old.
over 100 years ago. And I kind of knew it, and I didn't really have a whole lot in common with these people other than boats. Like that was like my focus. For me, it was all about the boat. So if we can get more different people, give them boating experience so they can walk into these environments that are not at all eclectic or diverse and they feel comfortable there. I think it really breaks the ice. Because think about it, Brendan. If you would walk into an all Filipino party or club, or all Black or all Hispanic, I mean, you might feel a little weird unless somebody came up to you and said, hey, I know you're my friend, you're my neighbor. Or like if you had a partner who was part of this group, you would feel part of it. So that's what it's like for us walking into a sporting environment that appears to be completely white. I know it's not, but for the most part it is. And you want to bring your friends and family, you want them to feel safe. I feel that most people that I know on boats really want some sort of diversity, but they don't know how to do it because they don't have any Black friends or Hispanic friends or Asian.
And where's the place to start? Most people I race with are always looking for more crew members to add to their rotation. A lot of folks just they start a race and they're one or two bodies short. Where can they go?
I mean, at work, I mean, you have to work with different kind of people. Like people at your gym, like, they're fit, your neighbor, anybody, just invite people on your boat. Like I've had like the most random people on our boat. So what I'm doing, I'm working on the other end and I'm going into historically like Black universities and colleges and social groups and trying to engage people about water sports in general, not just sailing, and say, hey, why don't you try this? I'm just super exhausted because I've been doing this for like 20 years on our boat. So I would love it if more people did because more and more people are starting to come out.
Yeah. Um, One of the things that I really admire about you, Marie, is that you started an adult sailing program at Los Angeles Yacht Club several years ago before other clubs were doing that. And just seeing you guys out on the water, you were taking a very diverse group of people out. And I know a lot of those people stuck with sailing, and some of them have their own boats. I think one is now a volunteer on the race, a regular volunteer on the race committee, because I see her on the committee boat. How does that help grow the sport, not just for LA Yacht Club, but other clubs around the country?
That's a huge question. I mean, you have yacht clubs and then you have community sailing centers. And community sailing across the country is really growing. We don't have that much of it in Southern California. You have commercial outfits like marina sailing, blue water cruising and whatnot, where you can get your classes in charter, or you have yacht clubs. In Northern California, there's more community sailing like Treasure Island, Alameda Community Sailing. Across the country, that's really growing right now. I see through my US sailing eyes, how that's maybe saving the sport. Now, in terms of yacht clubs, it's kind of hard because every year for most clubs, you have a new Commodore. And so that really sets the tone of what's happening. So with community sailing at Los Angeles Yacht Club, because I and my husband Bill were able to throw ourselves into that, it was a huge time commitment. And I'm a volunteer. You have to have a core of people that are really passionate about it. I don't know how to make that happen. Some clubs are kind of dying. That is a way to get people in, but then you have to buy some club boats and maintain them, or have members that are willing to have these these new sailors on their boats.
Mm-hmm. You're involved with the National Women's Sailing Association, and I'm involved with the local one, and I love their model where they just find National Women's Sailing Association members who already own their boats, and they take beginners out sailing on their own boats. The club doesn't have to buy anything. They don't need a facility. They just need to organize a regular event. And the insurance falls on the boat owner, not the club. At least I think that's the way it works. Do you think that's an effective model to grow the sport?
I do. It's working really well for the Women's Sailing Association of Santa Monica Bay in particular. There are more and more women who own boats, or couples who own boats, that will do this. But yeah, you have to have dedicated people who want to give back. Otherwise, it makes it really hard. So I don't think it will work in every club, because every club, composition, the whole vibe is a little bit different. The aim is a little bit different, but it works well for the Women's Sailing Association. And I really believe the whole concept should expand. I'm a member of two different women's sailing associations, local ones plus the national one. And I almost never go. I just give them money so that they can continue to have their dog parties and all that stuff. Women tend to be the sailors that are best at doing outreach, bringing new people onto the boat. But I know there are guys who do it too.
I want to go back to the TransPac. There are always great stories from a TransPac. Was there a particular moment? Was there a broach or something at 2 a.m., as is normally the case, that made the crew as a whole nervous or frightened, but it actually brought them together?
Yeah, our big knockdown and spinnaker wrap happened the night of day 5. And by that point, everyone was pushing a boat like crazy during the day, but it hadn't crossed an ocean yet with the new configuration. So I just wanted it to get there. I knew all the things that could go wrong. So I went down that night. We had a lot of wind, and the kids got crazy and, wanted to hit those 20s. And yeah, it was a mess. And so I was tossed out of my bunk, and my hatch, of course, was open because by then it was starting to warm up. Water everywhere. I could see the boom in the water. It was a mess. But the good news is like everybody kind of pulled it together, and we whipped out our wonderful UK Sailmakers Blast Reacher. That was the most stable, reliable, wonderful recovery sail we could have had. We sailed with for like the next 24 hours just so we could settle down and get all the water out of the boat and everything.
So you
Yeah,
use the Blast Reacher is not only a staysail, but it actually serves as a spinnaker net, because the only spinnaker wrap you had in the race, as I recall, was before you were using the Blast Reacher for that purpose.
exactly. So
Good to know.
after that wrap, we're like, oh, I think Brendan told us about this. So that's what happened on Instagram there. There's a funny video. We're so tired. I think it was like 2 days before we finished. And I'm out in the cockpit with an oven mitt talking to the blast reacher.
I wanted to ask you, what's the next step for the Offshore Racing Outreach program?
That's a good question. Okay, so Good Trouble is being renovated right now. We're conducting upgrades that were not necessary for the race, but to make it totally bulletproof offshore training boat is where we'd like to go. We're not sure about funding for next year for another TransPac. We're hoping to perhaps continue our relationship with J-Rolled, but they're going through some changes. I know Hula Girls on the market. So we're just all kind of, repositioning. But ideally, we are continuing to raise money. As we regroup for the next TransPac, we would like to continue to collect funds so that we can still scholarship people in other people's programs. So we could send people to pack up on J-Roll, for example. So that's something aside from Good Trouble that we're working on, is still raising money.
So if anyone wants to get involved, either make a contribution or submit a resume for consideration to be part of your crew next year, how should they do that? What's your website?
SailORO is the URL.
So if they Google Offshore Sailing Outreach, they'll find you.
Bam. Yes.
Great. Tell me a little bit about the name of the boat. Good Trouble, that's not the original name of the boat you procured for TransPac. You named it Good Trouble. Where did that come from?
Oh, everybody knows John Lewis, our congressman, who said, in order for us to progress, we got to get to some good trouble, which is basically like pushing the bounds of history and sticking our necks out and doing more.
Because we have international listeners to the podcast, not everyone knows who Congressman John Lewis was. He was part of the sit-ins in the early 60s when he was in college to help integrate lunch counters, especially in the South.
And he was pretty much the target of racist and other kind of old school thinking folks in the Midwest and the South. And he stood up for equal rights. And he got into a lot of good trouble by becoming a member of Congress, becoming part of the establishment, and doing it from the inside.
Marie, I want to thank you for participating in our podcast. I'm looking forward to seeing not only what your leadership at US Sailing and other organizations accomplish, but also seeing more diversity and participation in our sport. So I'd also like to thank our listeners, and you can find more episodes of our Lessons Learned podcast in the how-to section of our website at uksailmakers.com. Episodes are also streaming on our YouTube channel and are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. For UK Sailmakers, I'm Brendan Huffman, and I hope these lessons learned will help you sail with confidence.